Cardwell, Cardwell Counselling, and this is the second video on advice on how to deal with social anxiety. So fear plays a great part in social anxiety disorders, and fear is one of those things that unfortunately we need to keep us safe. That's ancestral. It comes through our very core of being that we realise to stay safe we have to fear things, we have to be afraid of the unknown, and we have to be afraid of the things that are dangerous. But our brains can't determine between the things that are actually dangerous and the things that are actually safe until we've processed a lot of information. So being social creatures, we like to live in communities, and we need to have deep connections with friends, family, other people. And these deep connections are what we would have experienced years ago in tribal communities, and those connections are inherent in who we are as people. As human beings, we are very social creatures, and this community, this sense of binding together, the sense of tribalism, really comes from our thousands of years ago when we had to work together to survive. So within us, within the very core of our thinking, and within the core of our wanting to feel safe, is bonding, is community, is feeling good together, because there's a sense of security in that. And so to keep that sense of security, we have a deep need to be liked by other people, because if we're not liked, we fear isolation, we fear unemployment, we fear being lonely, and those are real fears that we don't like inside. So there's a real part of us that strives for connection with community and to feel good. And our anxiety is part of that. Our healthy anxiety helps us to recognise the boundaries of not offending people in social circles, in certain circumstances. We have a level of anxiety that causes us to behave a certain way so that we fit in, so that we're not offensive, and we feel our way into relationships very cautiously so that we don't offend, and that we're able to work together and work each other out in a way that we feel safe together. And that's how human relationships are formed, and that's how we commit ourselves. And this is based around anxiety. And this is a healthy anxiety because, of course, that's what helps us to socialise and keep our tribes together. However, some people are oversensitive to social anxiety. And what that means is they become oversensitive to the thoughts or feelings of other people, and we become oversensitive to social connections. It's all to do with our amygdala. We've talked about the amygdala in other videos. It's the feel of fear. When this becomes oversensitive and we think about going into social situations and the amygdala is overreactive, we become fearful of going to that situation because we may overstep those social boundaries or upset people, and we create a social anxiety fear for ourselves because we're frightened that we might become isolated. So where does social anxiety come from? Well, there's a few explanations, and one of them is genetics. Some of us are genetically more sensitive to feeling anxiety than others, and there's good evidence to show that generationally, mum and dad could have suffered from social anxiety, as could their parents. And genetically, we can adopt some of that DNA, some of those genetics to cause us to be more sensitive than some other people. And that's an element of it. Now, another factor, a very strong factor in social anxiety, is physically what we observe. So we may observe people who have been mocked, who have been taken the mickey out of, and we look at that situation, we see their behaviour, and we think to ourselves, well, if I behave like that or in a certain way, then I'm likely to be mocked or teased, and people will think less of me as a person. And we can take on these thoughts and feelings by watching other people and how they behave. Now, the other way that we can, adopt social anxiety is through our direct experience of life. So if we're teased as younger people, or if we were bullied at school, or we've done something embarrassing in a social situation, and we've created an emotion around these, and these thoughts and feelings have stuck with us, then these can cause us to withdraw from situations because we have less confidence about ourselves. And that less confidence means that if we go to a social situation, then we'll make a fool of ourselves, we won't feel confident, and people will reject us because of how we think they perceive us to be. Another way is through reading or hearing. So social media has a massive implication now and a massive effect on teenagers' lives, most of our lives, in that we look at Facebook, the general social media sites, and we read a lot of information about social situations, about people's experiences of life, that cause us to take this information into our brain, relate it to ourselves, and then project it in a way that is happening to us. And so we read about negative activities, or we watch soap operas. Advertisers are really great at making us feel like a piece of our soul is missing, and if we don't have their product, then we're not as good as we should be. So reading, social media, hearing things also contribute to social anxiety. And these smaller components can be broken, broadly speaking, into three parts. Those are the physical feelings, thoughts, and the behaviours. Now, the physical feelings are the racing heart, the reddening of the skin, the blushing, the sweating, the weakness in the muscles, nausea or butterflies, a dry mouth, perhaps a shaky voice, and poor concentration. And most of the time, we don't really recognise all of these physical symptoms because our focus isn't on them. It's really more on our thoughts. And our thoughts are very much about how we interpret the events that cause our reaction. So, for example, we could be walking down a corridor, a busy corridor, and see a good friend walking towards us and shout hello, and they might not acknowledge us. And as we walk past, our thoughts could be, oh, I've done something wrong, I've offended them, they don't want to speak to me, we're going to fall out, I'll never speak to them again. And these are really very real thoughts that we tend to think when we've got that overreactive amygdala, and those are the fears that we get. Now, a healthy thought would be, crikey, he's busy, obviously he's got his mind somewhere else and he didn't see me, which is probably more of the case. But we take these negative thoughts and we magnify them, and then we create anxiety for ourselves by the very thoughts that we use. People with social anxiety presume the problem with interpersonal communication lies within themselves, and the situations are interpreted as threatening because they think something bad is going to come out of the situation that's going to possibly harm them, and this causes more fear and more anxiety. Now, there are some common beliefs, and these beliefs often go unchecked. These are the ones that are holding you back. You may identify with some of the following. Statements like, everyone has to like me. If I make a mistake, it means I'm a failure. People are always looking at me and judging me. People think I'm boring, lazy, stupid, or if I say something, I'll mess this up. And these are typical thoughts that people have that suffer from social anxiety. Before events and during events, those are the thoughts that run through the mind. Now, when it comes to our behaviours, when we're faced with social anxiety, we do things that help us make us feel safer, safety behaviours. So the most common one is to avoid the situation altogether, or to do something to reduce the anxiety. And long term, these are not very helpful. When we're faced with social anxiety, we'll do lots of things to help us feel safer. So first of all, we'll try and avoid the situation altogether. If we can't avoid the situation, we'll stay out of the way, we'll keep ourselves in the corner, in the dark, wherever we can't be noticed. Or we may do things like getting to a meeting just on time as it starts, so we don't have to socialise and talk to people, and make sure we leave right at the end of the meeting, so that we don't have to again socialise, where there's the risk of fear that we might make a fool of ourselves or be judged by people through what we say or how we behave. Do any of these ring true for you? Declining invitations to parties, making excuses so you don't have to meet up with friends, or distracting yourself from anxious thoughts by avoidance, picking up other things to do, put your focus on it, or getting stressed before a meeting or before a party. So to avoid all of these things and to do these things to reduce your anxiety, long term these are not very helpful. They lock you into a social anxiety condition, and this reinforces the fear of the situation for you. Social anxiety can begin with any three of these factors. You may start to feel physical symptoms first, sweating, hot flushes, perhaps butterflies, knots in the stomach, and that's what you may notice first. However, it could be your thoughts that start the social anxiety, which then escalate. So for example, you may think, oh, don't stutter over your words. If I stutter over my words, people will think I'm uneducated or stupid, and then I'll look foolish. And so the anxiety begins to increase with the thoughts and spiral upwards until you feel more and more anxious, which increases the physical symptoms, of course, which increases the thoughts. And also then the behaviours are affected, because you want to avoid the situation, you want to avoid talking to people. That causes you to become quiet, to disassociate from the relationships and perhaps people at work or people around you. And there becomes a positive feedback loop where these symptoms all come together to reinforce the fears that you're feeling inside. And the fear becomes very, very real for you. But the more we put these off, the more we reinforce the fear. Then when you have to face a situation again, the fears reinforce and you feel that social anxiety coming on again. So what I want you to do this week, I want you to make a list of your thoughts and feelings around social anxiety. Simple as that. Put some points down, what your thoughts are, how you feel about it, and what goes on in your mind, what are your emotions, what are your physical symptoms, and how does that cause you to behave. And once you've done that, write it all down and have a look at it and think about it. And this is going to lead on to next week, where we're going to look at some CBT, some cognitive behavioural therapy, and this is going to help you to break your social anxiety down into smaller parts where you're able to deal with it in a very, very simple way. You have to set your mind to it, you have to push yourself, you have to challenge your thoughts. But we're going to do this next week, and hopefully this will be really, really helpful for you. So if you've enjoyed this video, you've got something out of it, and you feel a bit more encouraged that you can do something about your social anxiety, please follow my counselling site, Rick Cardwell Counselling on Facebook. That means that you'll get anything that I put on there. Any free resources will come automatically to you. You'll get a notification. Give me some likes, give me some comments, give me thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever suits you. But most of all, really think about your social anxiety and want to do something about it. And the next video we put on next week, I'm sure that if you can take hold of that, you're going to do a lot of good in being able to deal with your social anxiety, to completely minimise it, or to get it out of your life altogether. So thanks for watching.